Good afternoon, everyone. We are back from recess, and it is now 2:28 p.m. And prior to the lunch recess, Representative Christina Sablan had the floor. So we will proceed this afternoon. Representative Sablan, you still have the floor.
Chair, if I may, before we proceed,
Yes, Council.
pursuant to your request this morning, I actually did find the section and the language from AG and the DPS Commissioner, and I got his approval, even though it's attorney-client privilege, to read it into record. So, if I may be allowed to read into record,
Do you have a copy for us?
I do have copies. I just blacked out the dates and emails just for so that it doesn't get into public. It's a communication between Commissioner Guerrero and AG Edward Menebusa.
Okay, give me a moment to review it.
No problem.
Thank you. We are back from recess, and prior to the recess, Council Uggan requested that he read a letter from or rather an email between the Attorney General, Edward Manibusan, and the Commissioner of Public Safety. You have the floor, Council.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, just to explain this document, this is actually 3 emails. So, and this is just in response to the public purpose, right? The first email is at the very bottom. Greetings, sir. This is from Commissioner to the AG. I've been receiving a number of concerns regarding protective service detail for the governor, lieutenant governor, and their family. I know one CMC 2504C specifically says to safeguard public property and buildings, public officials.
Excuse me, counsel. Can we have the witness read it into the record?
Let me ask, are you fine with reading it, Commissioner?
Thank you, sir. I just want to make sure to, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I corrected. Greetings, sir. I've been receiving a number of concerns regarding protective service detail for the governor, lieutenant governor, and their family. I know that Title 1, Division 2, subsection 2504C specifically says to safeguard public properties, buildings, public officials, and to keep as part of the duties and responsibilities of the department. With that said, could you provide an opinion regarding the security detail for the family members of the governor, lieutenant governor, please? Thank you. I'll await your response. So response, the statute 1 CMC section 2504 is written broadly that it covers family members of the governor, lieutenant governor. The statute begins with a recitation to include but not limited to the following, and then lists the duties and responsibilities under this section of the statute. I hope this responds to your inquiry. Edward E. Manibusan, Attorney General. And I roll back. Thank you, sir. I just want to ensure that the department is covered.
Thank you for reading that into the record. I have a question. Thank you for that email, even though it's redacted.
The Chair, just the only redacted is the emails for the commissioner and the AG, as well as the time. I can provide that to you if you want.
Thank you. We appreciate receiving a copy of this email. And the witness earlier testified that he received a legal opinion from the Attorney General's office. This certainly is not a legal opinion. It is not on letterhead. It is an email, a copy of an email. But I have a question to the commissioner about this. Why, aside from saying that you've been receiving concerns about PSDs for the governor and the lieutenant governor, in your 6 years of being DPS commissioner, assigning PSDs to protect Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres and the lieutenant governor, why would you feel that, now would be an appropriate time to request for a legal opinion whether the department is covered according to your email, or covered as to the public purpose of these PSDs? You didn't request for this opinion or anything from the Attorney General in the beginning of your term? You didn't request for it in the middle of your term? Why now?
Well, Madam Chair, hear me okay?
Yes.
The program has been running successfully. I mean, smoothly. And then we started getting attacked about, the PSD for the governor, PSD for first lady, PSD in general. So I decided to reach out to the AG just to give me a clarification of that, and that's what brought this up. I hope that answers your.
I recognize Representative Edwin Probst.
And may I just before Congressman Probst?
Sure.
And for information, Madam Chair, the AG is my legal counsel.
Very well.
Or for the Department of Public Safety, I'm sorry.
Very well. Understood. Recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair, Council. I just wanted to clarify a few things. The complaints that have been coming through social media and through our constituents and others is, Commissioner, I think it's because it seems rather, what's the word to use? Excessive. and also because of the fact that it is unprecedented. And I say this because um, I've talked to former commissioners, but I've also talked to others who have worked PSD in the past and other things, and former police officers and everything, and others in the community that are in the know, and they do know that former governors, um, actually no governor has had this type of security, right? It is, it seems to the average person excessive, especially in the light of the fact that we've had several who have stated that there have been no known threats, including the chief. But regardless, they do need protection. We understand that. But if we were to follow the statute, sir, and to really look at it, if you read this, it does not say to safeguard public property and buildings. It says public officials. It doesn't specify, right? It's vague. It's broad. Public officials. Commissioner, for the record, does public officials include um, the House and the Senate? Members of the House and Senate?
Yes, they do, Congressman. And it's just that we've never had a request from either the House or the Senate with the request for transport to and from Tinian and Rhoda from mayors and other elected officials. And we've provided that for them.
Certainly, and we understand that, and perhaps many of us do not request for it because we do not feel a need for it. But I'm sure if there were a threat to one of us, we would request for it and be provided. Absent of the threat, I don't think we would request for it. But hypothetically, Commissioner, let's say that I was not feeling safe because I've been very critical of the administration, of DPS, of many things, and I'm not feeling safe. So, as a public official, if I request for PSDs, will I be granted that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. And just for the record, is it the governor who determines how many PSDs he gets, or was that a request from him, or is it something that's just determined by you?
It's in close consultation with the chief of his security, how many people that you actually need to secure the area or the duties.
Okay. And hypothetically again, so if I were to request for a PSD for myself, one for me, one for my wife, and one for my children, would that be unreasonable?
One for you, your wife, and your children.
Yes.
No, it wouldn't be, sir.
Okay, thank you. My concern, sir, is with the limited resources. We do know that that DPS is always in need of more manpower and more service. What if there was a threat and say 29 of us in the House and Senate requested for our own PSDs? Would that have an impact on the operations of DPS?
Your question is, if all 29 legislators will request PSDs,
Correct.
do I have enough manpower?
Yes.
Sir, we have an agreement among all law enforcement entities that
Mhm.
should the need to pull people in to assist in the law enforcement, the DPS needs that we do, and we've done that with during disasters. We were pulling people from as far west Rhoda, or from other entities within the department, within the CNMI, or within Saipan alone.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. And also, with that said, because I am a public official, if I do need escorts, if I do decide to go fishing, I could request for that as well, right? And I would be given that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will remember that. And I thank you, Commissioner. I yield at this time.
Thank you, Representative Probst. Again, I will revert back to Representative Tina Sablan. She had the floor before we went for the lunch break, and I will give the floor back to her.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome back, Commissioner and Council Ogden. Commissioner, thank you for sharing this correspondence. Thank you for sharing this correspondence with the Attorney General regarding protective service provided by the department And may I just ask for the record, when did you request this advice?
Congresswoman, I redacted that so that it wouldn't get out to the public. If you like, we can go off and I can give you that information. We can,
Why would that be information that couldn't be disclosed on the record? It's just
because it is
when it was
attorney-client
requested.
privilege, and that is what my client agreed for me to expose to the community, to the committee in public.
And that's why the dates are redacted.
Yes.
I see. In any case, we did pull the law that was cited by your counsel, Mr. Ogden, and that's 1 CMC 2504 with respect to the duties and responsibilities of the Department of Public Safety, and our legislative assistant has placed that on the screen for your review. And as Representative Probst noted earlier, Commissioner, for the first time in CNMI history, full-time protective services have been provided by the department to the family, the spouse and other family members of the governor. So in reviewing this law and the relevant subsection, which is C, that you cite in your email to the Attorney General, this section provides that DPS duties include safeguarding public officials and keeping the peace at official meetings and public ceremonies. And so I guess my question for you is, did the governor at any time ever ask you to expand the department's interpretation of protection and safeguarding for public officials to include his spouse and other members of his family?
No, he has never, we've never discussed this issue. This is something I took upon myself to clarify, since the department was getting hit for it, per
Sure.
se.
But who actually made the decision to expand that interpretation of that duty and responsibility for the first time in CNMI history to include full-time service, protective service for the family?
Objection, Chair. I refer to his last answer. He's already stated that he asked the AG, and the AG
That's
gave
not
him
my
that
question,
advice.
Counsel, Madam Chair. If we may just clarify, the question is, who made the decision to expand this interpretation of the duties and responsibilities of the department to include family members of the governor for the first time in CNMI history?
Councilwoman, so the question, how did it go about, how did it originate, that even the family was extended this thing?
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, the chief of security is in charge of the security detail for the governor. Now, I don't know the day-to-day operation that they do, or he does, or orders that he gives, whether he tells one of the drivers, or not drivers, the officers, to go pick up the kids. That's on him. But the reason why I asked this question was because we were getting hammered left and right, and I wanted to clarify it. And if the AG would have come back and says, you cannot do that anymore, I'm sure we would have addressed that issue then.
I see. So is it your testimony then, am I understanding you, that it was the governor's chief of security, Officer Joey Cruz, who made the determination that full-time protective service was necessary for the family members of the governor?
It's my testimony to say that he is in charge of that section. I don't micromanage how he runs his section, as with other sections within the department.
Okay. So you yourself did not make the call to say, we need to provide full-time service for protective service for the family members of the governor?
No, I didn't.
You did not. Thank you. And are there any limits at all on protective service provided by the department for public officials and their families.
I believe that's the limits. What's happening now is basically the limits. I don't know if we can go any further, expand beyond that. That's for any public official that may request, as Congressman Probst earlier asked.
So there are no limits. Any public official can request any number of protective service officers for themselves and any member of their family?
According to the law and what the AG had responded to me.
I see.
So is it your testimony then that there are no limits as to how many PSDs or the limitations of where and what they can do? Is that your testimony? Is that what I'm understanding from you?
Well, Congresswoman, or Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I think the right answer to that is, again, it depends on, if all 29 members, for example, is requesting PSD, and again, for example, all of you have 7 kids, you want us to provide 7 PSD per family. I mean, that's something we need to go back, and talk to, for example, Congressman Manglonian, and say, sir, can we do adjust on your personnel because we have, we're limited resources, all 29. It's open for discussion, but surely if resources are available at that time, then we would honor that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. So according to the law, the same section that Representative Sablon alluded to safeguard public property and buildings, public officials. So is it your testimony then, based on the email you've had with the Attorney General, that family members, the spouse of the governor and his children, are considered public officials? Based on that email, it's obvious you interpret it to be that way, but I just wanted to get it from you.
So they are not public officials, but based on the interpretation of the AG, they are covered under the statute.
Okay, thank you. Would that include the governor's brothers?
I've never had to put PSDs to. We've never came across that situation where we have to provide PSD for the government, for the brothers. I'm sorry.
Okay, you've never come across a situation where you had to provide any PSDs to the governor's brothers. Is that your testimony?
Yes, not to my recollection. I don't believe I've ever.
Has the chief of or the head of security for the governor ever communicated in any way to you that the governor's brothers need PSDs?
No, not to my recollection.
Okay, thank you. I yield back to Representative Sablon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess just to wrap up this line of questioning, in your view, does this coverage of protective service for all public officials and any of their family members extend even for protective service for unofficial events or private functions?
Congresswoman, yes, it would, because the interpretation that the AG gave out didn't distinguish between public or private.
I see. In your view, Commissioner, do you think that there should be limits?
Congresswoman, I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. I think if any, then it needs to be addressed with the statute. If the statute is amending, this body would recommend that, then.
I understand that,
Yes.
and it would ultimately be up to the policymakers to decide. But I'm asking you, as the administrator for the Department of Public Safety, you know better than anybody the resources of the department and what's reasonable and what's excessive. Do you think that there should be limits on protective service for public officials and their families?
Again, Congresswoman, I think my position would be I'd rather not answer that question.
May I ask why not?
I have a job to protect public officials. Uh, and my opinion as far as if that's excessive or not will rest on budgetary or personal availability. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. So even if the demands of public officials for protective service strain your department to the point of your officers not being able to provide other essential services, you would not have an opinion on that?
Okay, so if your question is if I'm strong out thin, uh, I won't come up with an opinion of how I
Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. If the
Commissioner.
demands of public officials and their family members for protective service for any and all occasions, whether they're official or not, strain the resources and your officers, Commissioner, to the point of affecting your ability to attend to your other critical services in protecting and serving this community, you still would not have an opinion on whether there should be limits on that service?
I will not provide an opinion on that simply because my job is to follow what's in the law.
Okay.
And if I have to bring all my commanders together to brainstorm how we're going to accomplish the mission, then that's basically how we do it anyway.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Commissioner. I can move on unless there are any other follow-up questions.
I have a follow-up question. Commissioner, you have testified that it is not your position to determine or to say that it is excessive or not. You are the DPS commissioner. Who would render that determination, whether providing excessive number of PSDs to Governor Torres, his family, would be excessive? If not you, who? And let me remind you, you alluded it to relate to the budget issue. And as far as we understand, you are the approving authority over the DPS budget. Is that correct? So whose position would it be? Who, if you are not in a position to determine whether that is excessive or wasteful, um, if not you, who?
Well, Madam Chair, again, I will follow what's written in the law, and if it warrants needing more assistance from other entities, then or additional funding, then as I mentioned with the fuel earlier, I will consult with Secretary of Finance or OMB for assistance as far as funding is concerned.
Okay, I yield for now. I recognize Representative Edwin Probst.
Thank you. Just a last point or last concern I wanted to bring up with regard, because Commissioner, this is a broad, and some of it is very vague. As we, I have a disagreement with the Attorney General, but he is the AG, and I'll yield to him, obviously. But there's also other letters in there, not just C, which is to safeguard public property and buildings, public officials, and so forth. We also look at letter A that says to provide effective police protection to inhabitants of the Commonwealth, to provide effective police protection to inhabitants of the Commonwealth. Commissioner, for the record, there has been concerns about this. There has been concerns brought up when there was somebody drowning during that Deer Meat for Dinner family vacation trip, whatever it is called, to Pagan. when the Zodiac and other boats were there, I do know that there was a drowning, and that was brought up, and we talked to the lack of resources for the search of that, and they did use other boats to try and search for this missing swimmer. So the point I'm trying to make is that we can't only look at sea. I think it's important, Commissioner, to look at the whole composite of these letters in this statute, and certainly we cannot discount the importance of providing effective police protection to inhabitants of the Commonwealth. That wasn't a question; it was just an observation, and I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. I will return the floor back to Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit and also follow up on your answers to an earlier question regarding the budgeting challenges that you face at DPS, particularly in budgeting for the governor's use of DPS resources. So, Commissioner, would you just clarify the extent to which DPS uses any federal funds for the governor's security detail?
Congressman, that's a very vague and open question. If you can be more specific, perhaps, then we could provide a better answer.
I think the question is pretty specific. Federal funds that are available to the department. You mentioned the boating safety grant. There are other federal funds that you access. To what extent do those funds support the protective services that you deliver to the governor?
As mentioned, the boating safety grant, the funding for those are mostly used for maintenance, to include the maintenance of the boat. That's not specific to just the boat that the governor goes, is used to provide protective service. To my recollection, and I don't believe we have any other funds that support the governor's activities, i.e. the PSD operations.
Okay, but what about when the officers, aren't your police officers also funded under the boating safety grant?
No.
Not at all.
Part of the grant formula is overtime, fuel, and personnel costs are covered by the local government.
I see. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And my next question then, is it in your authority, Commissioner, to approve or disapprove the use of DPS boats and personnel to accompany the governor on any of his boating excursions?
Can you repeat the question, please, Ian?
Is it within your authority to approve or disapprove the use of DPS boats, DPS personnel to accompany the governor on any of his boating excursions?
Yes, I have the final say so on yes.
Okay. And have you ever disapproved the use of DPS boats or DPS personnel for this purpose?
Not to my recollection, no.
Thank you. And then picking up from the last question before we went into recess, Cam, if you could please pull up that particular page from the boat log. It was on June 10th. Yes. Okay. Maybe, there you go. Highlight that part. Thank you. So, Commissioner, this is a page from your DPS Voting Safety Log, and that's dated June 10th, 2017, and officer testimonies indicated, consistent with what's in this boat log, that boating safety officer shadowed a 17-foot boat on June 10th, 2017. Do you know who owned the 17-foot boat that was traveling around Goat Island?
Chair, that misstates the evidence. It doesn't state shadow, it just says 17-footer by Godan.
I was referencing the testimonies also, the earlier testimonies. So this page corroborates.
And he never testified today that there was a 17-footer
I-
being shadowed.
Madam Chair, the question is, does the commissioner know who owns the 17-footer that's referenced in this, on this page?
Okay, now, okay, I'm not aware who owns a 17-foot footer boat.
Thank you. Do you know if the governor ever owned a 17-foot boat?
Not to my knowledge.
Or what about his brothers?
Again, not to my knowledge. I know they have own boats. I don't know the sizes of those boats.
You know they have, I'm sorry, how many boats?
I said I know they have some boats. I just
Oh.
don't know the size of those boats.
Okay. And just to be clear, has DPS ever provided protective or escort services for the governor's brothers' boats?
If the governor's on board, yes. If
Okay.
not, not to my knowledge.
Thank you. Has the governor ever advised you of the First Lady's plans to go to Menegaha using DPS boats and personnel?
As I mentioned earlier, the chief of security has come up and says the first lady or the governor and the first family is going to go to Managaha. They're asking to use to be transported,
Okay.
and I just tell them if it's a go or not. And
Okay. So the process is the governor makes the request through his chief of security. Chief of security submits the request to you, and then you approve it. That's how it goes.
the chief of security informs me if they need the boat. I'm not sure what that communication is between the two of them.
Okay, thank you. And is that the same when the governor plans to go fishing? He communicates that to his chief of security, and then the chief communicates that to you.
Again, the chief of security is the one that enforced me. Again, I don't know the communication between the governor and lieutenant governor, if the governor and the chief of security, if he just goes off the governor's schedule or what. I'm not at liberty. I'm not privy to those information.
Okay, but the governor has never gone to you directly to ask you for the service, and you have also never communicated with him directly to make these arrangements.
No, not to my recollections. Most of the chief security that.
Okay, thank you. Um,
I have a clarifying question.
sure.
Commissioner, you testified that it would be the chief of security for the governor who would inform you. Let's say that the governor is going out fishing, or the Mrs. Torres needs to go to Managaha, and then you would have the final say so to approve these boats to escort or PSD or shadow the governor and the first lady. So how do you know if the chief of security for the governor is telling you factual information that it's actually the governor who will be escorted? If you just rely on his word, do you have any process to verify the information, or we just rely on somebody's word and okay, go, we'll send the boating safety out? For all we know, based on what we've heard from you today, we don't even know if the chief of security is, taking his own family. Do you see what I'm trying to say? I'm just trying to understand this. So can you speak to us a little bit about that? How does it go about that you simply rely the chief of security? Do you not verify with Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres if they are actually going on these boats?
No, I don't verify with the governor or the first lady. I rely on the chief of security. He was trained for that position, and he has not given me any reason to doubt his credibility when it comes to requesting for. And I believe boating safety would advise me if it's his family that's going on the boat or any other than what was requested. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, fair. Yeah. I yield back to you, Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, why would DPS boats ever be used to transport the governor to Guam, Tinian, or Rota, wouldn't it be cheaper to just fly?
Again, if the chief security comes up to us and says the governor wants to be transferred or we need a boat to transfer the governor to Rota or to Guam, then that's what he's going to write on. Why he doesn't fly or what? I've never questioned the governor with that. I don't even question why he wants to ride the boat and not fly.
Yeah, and the chief of security did say that it was ultimately the governor's call, even whether they themselves would take a boat or fly. That was in his testimony, uh, and that the governor gives instructions as whether the PSD should fly or take DPS boats to or from these islands, even if it means traveling separately from their principals. Several PSDs, Commissioner, testified that the governor and first lady at times have released them from duty if they do not want or need an escort. And earlier in your testimony, Commissioner, you agreed that that does happen sometimes, correct? So to be clear, the governor does have considerable authority in determining whether PSDs accompany him or not, how many, even what mode of transportation they may use, and even if it means that the PSDs aren't even traveling with him. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, respectfully, you keep asking my client a multiple amount of questions at one time. If we could ask him specifically one at a time,
That's
he
one
could
question,
provide an answer.
Counsel.
But you
The
listed a
one
number of
question is,
things.
to be
That's what I'm
clear,
saying.
is it correct that the governor does have considerable authority in determining whether PSDs accompany him or not, how many PSDs, even what mode of transportation? All of this taken together.
If we can answer each question individually, I'd prefer that.
Is there a different answer for all of that?
It's just confusing for my client to give one answer to three different questions.
Okay. Does the governor have considerable authority in determining whether PSDs accompany him or not? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am, I'm sure it does because he is the governor.
Thank you. And does he have considerable authority in determining how many PSDs accompany him? Yes or no?
I'm sure he does since he's the governor.
Thank you. Does he have considerable authority in determining what mode of transportation they may use, even if it means they travel separately from him? Yes or no?
Again, he is the governor. He has that authority.
Thank you. So in this sense then, protective service by DPS for the governor or members of his family is more of an elective service. Would you agree? It's optional in that sense. He can decide.
I won't say it's an elective because the governor knows that if he's going out, my standing orders to the PSD, both boat or land, is that he at the minimum be shadowed.
Mhm.
When he posts this, you can go. I don't need a PSD. I'm not there to. And of course, a police officer wants to say, "Hold on, governor. No, you're not gonna." You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure, there's your standing order and then there's the practice, but he can and he has requested PSDs. He's also relieved them of duty. He can tell them how they travel. He can say whether they go with him or not, right? Right? That's what you just testified to earlier.
That question was asked and answered, and
Yes.
he did verify.
Thank you. And the answer was yes, he can choose. And so, by contrast, we heard from the lieutenant governor, and you also alluded to the lieutenant governor, his use of PSDs. The lieutenant governor chooses not to utilize PSDs to the extent that the governor does. And it's the governor who chooses to do so, to utilize the PSDs to the extent that he does, right? So my question for you, Commissioner, is do you yourself have the authority to approve or disapprove PSD travel?
So your question is, do I have the authority to disapprove travel for the PSDs?
Yes.
In most cases, no, because those PSDs travel under the governor's account.
Mhm.
And again, sometimes I don't know that their the itinerary of them leaving until we get a copy of the TAs.
I see. But they don't report to you? Or they do report to you? I mean, you said the security chief reports to you, right? And then they report to the security chief. But in terms of whether or not they travel, that's not your call.
Okay, sorry, I got kind of confused there. Yes, I do have the authority, but the authority to stop or the reasoning behind will mostly be because of funding purposes.
I see. And have you ever disapproved PSD travel for the governor?
Not to my recollection, no.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, Commissioner, what types of cargo get transported for the governor on DPS boats?
Congresswoman, again, these are very vague and open questions. If you could
Yes.
be more specific, I think it would
Sure.
help Commissioner
And
to
to
answer.
your knowledge, Commissioner, have hardware items, fishing gear, coolers, supplies for campaign events, alcohol, anything like that, have those ever been transported for the governor on DPS boats?
Councilman, I don't recall what the cargoes that the government brings on board.
You don't recall any cargo, or you don't know, you don't recall what types of cargo?
What type of cargo?
Okay. And I guess my next question is, how is it possible that it appears that no one in the boating safety program who has testified before this committee, and you yourself also, no one seems to know or remember what kind of cargo has ever been transported for the governor on DPS boats. How is that possible?
Councilman, I cannot answer for the other officers. First of all, I didn't see any of their testimony or their videos.
Mhm.
I don't go on the boat when the governor goes out, so I
Okay.
wouldn't know what cargoes he brings or how many coolers he brings or. So I don't. That's the reason why I don't know what cargoes are there, how many cargoes there are.
Okay.
Once I approve it, it's between the commander for boating and the chief of security as far as coordinating everything, what time they leave and all that.
Okay. But would you be concerned to know that there is, according to the testimonies that we heard here, that there is really no inspections ever of any types of cargo that get transported on these boats for the governor? Like even your boating safety captains couldn't recall ever having conducted an inspection, having ever seen any, they couldn't recall any cargo that would have been on these boats. Would that be a concern to you?
Well, Councilman, it's not a policy to document what cargoes go on the boat. Um, I leave that responsibility up to the captain of the boat. Um, but I will look further into the matter.
Okay. Thank you. But for now, at this time then, is it accurate to say that no one in DPS, including yourself, Commissioner, can say for sure whether or not endangered species, illegal weapons, drugs, or any other type of contraband may have been transported on DPS boats? If there's no policy to check, is that fair to say?
Congresswoman, it is a concern what you're bringing up, and I will discuss that further with the captains of each of the vessels.
Thank you, Commissioner. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. Moving right along, I will now recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Good afternoon, Commissioner and Council. How are you? I'm just going to go right into the line of questioning. Commissioner, are you aware that boating safety personnel have testified and that the boat logs confirmed that they have provided shadowing missions for the governor's brothers when they go fishing?
I'm aware of a Prime PSD provided the governors on board those boats.
Okay, can you repeat, please? I didn't hear your answer.
Provided that the governors on board the brothers' boats, because when the governor normally goes fishing, my understanding was he rides his brother's boats. He's never fished on our boat because our boats are inflatables. So my understanding was if he goes rides on the brothers' boats, that's when we provide shadowing for him.
Okay, so only when he is there on any boat.
Yes, to my knowledge, yes.
Okay, so that would be an yes. All right. So Commissioner Guerrero, boating safety personnel have testified that you give them the notification that Governor Torres and or his brothers are going fishing and to prepare the boating safety vessels. Records show that DPS personnel have indicated that the Zodiac 1, 2, and 3 jet skis and the jet boat have been used to accompany Governor Torres and or his brothers on personal fishing expeditions. Commissioner Guerrero, what do you have to say about this?
Thank you, Congressman. To answer your question, first, there's no Zodiac 2, it's only Zodiac 1 and Zodiac 3. And again, the reason that we do PSD for the governor's brothers if the governor is on board those vessels.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, next question. Has the boating safety federal grantor ever given prior approval of this shadowing or PSD mission in this manner, meaning for escorting Governor Torres and his brothers to go fishing?
Again, similar to the AG's opinion that council just provided members, there hasn't been an issue with the grantor regarding the boat being used for government functions, other functions other than boating, i.e. PSD. But again, because of a lot of concerns that was brought up that the governor's going fishing, the governor's being escorted with a boat, we tried to get a clarification from the grantor as well. And we got that, explained the situation, um, and they gave her their concurrence on that. So there's actually no issues from the grantor itself.
Fair enough. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. I have a few clarifying questions. You just testified that there are no issues with the federal grantors with respect to providing PSD for the governor um, to go on fishing excursions. Is that correct? Is that your testimony?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do they do they know these boats that are supposed to be used for rescue and boating safety programs and water safety education? Do they know that their boats are being used contrary to what the grant says?
Um, Yes, Madam Chair. Annually, we actually communicate, our program manager communicates with the grantor, and I see some of those communications. Mind you that the boats, not just our boats here on Saipan, Tinian and Rhoda as well, although they're boating safety boats, they use them to transport, for example, Tinian. They've used a boating safety boat to transfer the mayor from Tinian to Goat Island for what other government projects that they may have,
Mm-hmm.
i.e. Rota, if they have to go to Guam to pick up some supplies, provided, and that's the reason why we don't fund the fuel with the federal money, because that's outside the boating safety program. And the grantor agreed with that. So similar with this one, as long as it's an official function of the government, the grantor has no issues with it.
No issues with it. Um, okay, we'll move on. I would like to ask you a few questions about the last summer's trip to Pagan. Cam, do we have that video up for? Would you like to take a break at this time? Okay, so we'll proceed. Okay, thank you. Do you see this video on YouTube for deer meat for dinner?
What's that? It's boat, like it's super dry boat. It also sounded cold or something.
Ladies and
Commissioner
gentlemen, if we
Guerrero, do you recognize who was on that boat?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us who it is?
Governor Torres.
Thank you. Commissioner, DPS officers, search and rescue police boats, fuel, and vehicles were used in the governor's fishing and hunting expedition to the Northern Islands last summer, between June and July. They went up with Mr. Rob Arrington, who owns a YouTube channel called Deer Meat for Dinner. And the governor's family and friends also went on that trip. Do you know Mr. Rob Barrington? Have you ever met him?
During those days, I did, ma'am,
Okay.
at the dock.
How do you explain then the use of DPS resources for this particular trip? How did you justify that to the, let's say, the federal grantor?
Madam Chair, similar to as I mentioned earlier, there was uh, um, I asked the grantor to clarify if what's allowable. Then if you notice there, it was specific, as an example, the Arrington trip was used.
Mhm. Go on.
And then the grantor Grantor came back with an answer that considering all the scenario that you gave him, um, it was beneficial to the program itself.
Okay. And you have that in communication, in written communication from the grantor. Is that correct?
Yes, we do, and I
Okay.
can provide that at a later time
Okay.
for you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Guerrero, in your response to last year's special committee investigating the governor's expenditure, you indicated that 2 search and rescue boats and 2 utility vehicles were used to support the governor's trip to the Northern Islands. Do you remember that? We have it on recording.
I don't recall, Madam Chair.
Okay, fair enough. Multiple videos from Deer Meat for Dinner, such as the one we just saw, there's more of that, show that these boats and vehicles being used in fishing, hunting, and general recreational um, purposes and transportation around Pagan specifically. Um, can can we pull up the DPS regulation, please? 150-10-430 and 150-10-435. Thank you. Commissioner Guerrero, DPS regulations prohibit the use of department vehicles for personal business or pleasure and restrict the transportation of citizens for any reason other than to accomplish a police mission. Have you seen these regulations, Commissioner?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And what do you have to say about the use of police vehicles for transporting um, citizens and for pleasure and hunting?
Are you referring to the side-by-sides that were sent up to Pagan, Madam Chair?
We saw in footage ATVs and yes, the DPS vessels that were used.
I don't, first of all, DPR, boating does, well, we're not addressing boating, so we'll just talk about DPS in general. So, first of all, we didn't send any ATVs up to Pagan. I believe that's Fish and Wildlife ATVs. Um, we send the side-by-sides to Pagan, which are the four-seaters and the UTV, basically. Okay. My understanding with the Pagan trip, it was a MVA program. It was a government-funded program.
Okay.
That's the understanding, and that's why when they were requested, the mayor of Northern Island requested if we can loan them two UTVs for Pagan, and that's why we provided assistance to them.
So it was transported up to Pagan at the request of the Northern Island mayor.
They actually transported it. We didn't transport it up there. We loaned it to them, and they're the ones who shipped it up there.
Oh, okay. And have you gotten those vehicles back?
Sadly, no.
Okay. Do you know why? So it's a permanent loan
Um,
to the Northern.
well, one was actually approaching survey because they're actually
Okay.
old from the Coban,
Mhm.
and the other one we're trying to get it back. Unfortunately, there's no ship to bring it back, and it's not small enough for us to transport in our boats.
Okay. Do you or anyone else have any discussion at all with the governor about whether the use of these DPS search and rescue boats and utility vehicles for his trip to the Northern Islands was justified and or lawful?
My understanding, Madam Chair, is if my memory serves me correct, is that there was a briefing that it was an MVA. I'm not sure if it's a promotion program, and it's an official government function. That's when all this request came about. Now, to transport Mr. Arrington up there, again, the governor was on board. They requested transport for the governor. It wasn't specifically a request for Mr. Arrington himself.
I'm sorry, come again?
I don't recall that it was a specific request or just for Mr. Arrington to be transported.
Okay, and you said there was discussion among agencies to plan this whole thing. Were you a part of that conversation?
Well, it was a meeting, I believe, when they're organizing this in the
Okay.
governor's office, but
And were you a part of that discussion
I
or
believe I attended
briefing?
that meeting. I'm not, that's it's vaguely, I vaguely remember that
Okay.
meeting.
Do you recall how many planning meetings or briefings or you attended for this POGAN trip?
Chair, if I may,
Recognize council.
the governor actually sent my client a letter informing him that he has invoked his communication privilege, his executive privileges, which includes gubernatorial communications privilege and deliberative process privilege. And so I'm going to instruct my client at this time to not answer this line of question due to that.
Okay, thank you, council. Duly noted. Let me rephrase the question. Have you attended any briefings, planning meetings with respect to the POGAN trip? You testified that you vaguely remember. Do you recall how many? Was it just one or?
I believe, if I recall correctly, Madam Chair, it was only one. Then from that point on, I assigned an individual to be the point of contact with the mayor's office of the Northern Islands for coordination purposes.
Can you tell us who that point of contact is?
That's what you should say. You can give it to them later.
Madam Chair, I'm not for sure who I actually appointed at the time. I can give that information to you at a later time if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving right along, I'd like to, excuse me, present to you exhibit number 72. You have testified earlier that you have the approval of the federal grantor to utilize the boating safety boats, for escorting the governor on his fishing excursions, including the Pagan trip. Is that correct of our understanding? Okay. I will present to you an email, and this was already, like I said, previously entered as exhibit number 72. It is an email from Miss Vanessa De Leon Guerrero. And who is Miss Vanessa De Leon Guerrero, sir?
She's my program manager for boating safety.
Program manager for boating safety. And if we scroll down, you testified that none of I will reiterate, the federal grantors have not made an issue and in fact have approved escorting the governor. Is that correct? Of our understanding of your testimony earlier? You testified earlier that they approved of these activities. I'm just trying to reconfirm that.
Yes, for other activities, Madam Chair, but the response is on this particular email. This is the one I was referring to earlier.
That they approved it.
The document that I said I was going to provide you at a later time.
Okay, and you testified during that point that they approved of what boating safety is doing, right? In terms of escorting the governor. That was the question that was posed to you earlier, which you stated that,
I guess I will say, yeah, that they had no issues regarding that.
okay. But we also asked you earlier, did you get approval from the federal grantor? Did you?
Yes, it was. We're basing it off this email, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. According to Exhibit 72, Commissioner, after the Pagan excursion by Governor Torres, Mrs. Diane Torres, governor's brothers, their spouses, their children, their friends, and other family members, Mrs. Vanessa De Leon Guerrero, the program manager for boating safety, sent an email to Mr. Gary Jensen of the U.S. Coast Guard asking him in part, is there any restriction with utilizing boating safety vessels to transport the governor, accompanied by his family members or guests, to and from locations, meaning islands, or during other activities? Fuel that is used during these activities are paid by the CNMI local government. Ms. De Leon Guerrero further provides the specific example of the party or the fishing excursion or hunting excursion by Governor Torres and his family in Pagan, and by many family members of Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres. In Mr. Jensen's reply, he stated, generally speaking, protecting public officials would fall outside of the recreational boating safety realm and would not be an allowable cost. Commissioner Guerrero, during the entire vacation in Pagan last summer by Governor Torres and their extended family, was there any boating safety education being conducted in Pagan pursuant to the grant agreement?
The wearing of life support system, i.e., floating devices, um, warrant already constitutes a boating activity. On top of that, some of the guys did mention that they did board some vessels while they're up on the Northern Islands. So I would say it is, Madam Chair.
So wearing a life vest is part of an educational program, is that correct?
Yes, it is, Madam Chair.
Do they demonstrate how to properly wear? That would be the education part,
If they
right?
do, or just letting them know that you're on the boat, when they come on the boat,
Okay.
there's a child under that age, you would have to wear life jackets.
Thank you. Was there any law enforcement search and rescue mission happening during the, or being conducted during this time period? That would be part of their mission, is that correct? The
Yes.
boating safety,
Yes, it
according to
would.
the grant. So was there any search and rescue mission being conducted during that whole Pagan trip?
Madam Chair, there was an incident in the Northern Islands. I don't exactly know the dates or if it coincided with this, but I know there was a capsized vessel in Alamagan at that time, I believe. But I need to get back with you as far as the details of that particular, and if it coincided with coincided with this activity at that same time.
Are you talking about the boat for Mr. Ray Yumo?
Yes,
Okay, it was during this period.
yes.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Can you tell us if the DPS personnel who were up in Pagan at the time of the Pagan party, did they respond to that distress call?
I know that call came in for that. Again, I wasn't on scene to know if they actually respond or actually went there because I think it was in the middle of the night and seas were rough. Again, that was a captain's call. I can get a copy of the report and provide you with that. I'm not. I can't remember exactly if it was if they did travel over to the island or not from Pagan.
Do you recall if they actually made it to Alamagan?
I believe they did eventually. I'm not sure if it's the same night or not.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough. Did you instruct Miss DeLong Guerrero to ask the Coast Guard if that whole Pagan trip was allowable under the recreational boating safety grant?
Yes, ma'am, I did, and simple reasons because all the talks that's going around, we wanted to get clarification on the issue.
Okay. Why did Miss DeLeon Guerrero email the Coast Guard aside from you saying that there was talks? Do you know exactly what you heard, what the talks were? Why would it trigger a need to seek clarification from the grantors, federal grantors?
Madam Chair, can you repeat your question, please?
Why would Miss De Leon Guerrero, Vanessa De Leon Guerrero, the program manager for the boating safety program under your command, the Department of Public Safety, why would it trigger, aside from what you said that you heard talks, what exactly did you hear these talks that would trigger such an inquiry to the grantor?
Well, it's always been, this been a common practice for the last 4 or 5 years. Prior to that, when, if dignitaries go out, we can provide security. But the talk about the government going out fishing, he's been misusing the vessel, the Pagan issue, similar to the AG, I just want to get clarification from the grantor itself. And to the point where the grantor even told us to include that into the grant application for that following year.
Okay. So the fact that you had concerns about these talks, these rumors, um, and that you've tried to verify with the grantor, in this case, the United States Coast Guard, the fact that you sought clarification, is it fair to say that you think that Governor Torres is misusing these boats and that you would need to seek clarification? Because ultimately, you are the person responsible to approve these.
Can you repeat that regarding the Governor Torres?
Sure. Is it fair to say then that because you sought clarification from the federal grantor, that because of Governor Torres's use of these vehicles, which you approve, you have the ultimate say to approve? Is it fair to say that you felt maybe it wasn't right to be utilizing the boats this way, and that's why you sought and you asked Vanessa De Leon Guerrero for clarification from the U.S. Coast Guard?
Well, Madam Chair, not particularly, because we met the grantor a couple of times prior to this issue, and we do brief him what the activities that goes on, and he has never brought up an objection to it. But when all the talks, with the Northern Island issue, um, the governor's going fishing with the DPS boat, that's when I decided to get a clarification, put it in writing, and that's what led to this.
Okay, so why then after the fact? Why after they utilized all these resources, DPS, MVA to the Northern Islands? Why after the fact? Why would you not seek approval prior, just in case the Coast Guard would say, no, that's not allowed? Why would you seek clarification after the fact?
Well, because the issue wasn't being an issue prior to that.
Okay.
Okay, um, and that's why we wanted to for clarification, and gladly that we did, because the Coast Guard said, why don't you include that in your grant application for this next fiscal year, and we did it and it got approved.
Yes, but that was for next fiscal year, not the fiscal year that we're talking about here. Thank you. I will yield for now. And at this time, I would like to recognize Representative Bloss, Jonathan Atto.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Commissioner, Council. Good afternoon. Cam, can we bring up the exhibits on Excel sheet on boat logs? Exhibit 110. It's Exhibit 110. Commissioner, you have that in front of you? Is it clear enough, visible? It's not the computer screen?
Yes,
Okay. You got that? They got that right, Cam? Okay. All right. Thank you, Cam. So Exhibit 110 Excel sheets of boat logs. Based on the documents obtained by this committee from voting safety records, here's a spreadsheet of boat trips that have been cataloged. This committee has been able to catalog at least 85 boat trips to accompany Governor Torres and his brothers on personal fishing expeditions to Tinian, Rhoda, and the Northern Islands. Commissioner, what do you have to say about this log of 85 trips from boating safety?
Well, Councilman, it's a mission request, and our boat safety fulfilled it pursuant to the statute that we were mentioning earlier.
Which is the protective service, the
2404.
2404
Yes.
C, right?
Uh,
I mean, sorry, 2405C, correct? Is what you're citing for these trips?
yes, sir.
Okay. So we know that you did not get prior approval from the grantor, federal grantor. Did you ever get approval after the fact for these specific trips, not the Pagan trip?
Chairwoman, if I may, this is the first time we've seen this document, and I can attest to its accuracy. For example, there's some vessel use Zodiac 2, and as the commissioner just stated, there is no Zodiac 2. So I request that that you can provide us this and we can review it for its accuracy.
We can provide the boat logs. Those are taken from the boat logs. Has boating safety ever had a Zodiac 2? Because if you look at the dates, those date back to when DPS had those vessels under their custody. And the boating safety personnel that have come before this committee have testified to a Zodiac 1, Zodiac 2, which is out of commission, I believe, at this time, a Zodiac 3. So that's why you see a Zodiac 2 there as well.
Sorry, Commissioner, but yeah, that's my point, Chairwoman. If we can be allowed time to review this document just to confirm its accuracy.
Okay, sure. We will take a short recess, 5 minutes.
I don't know if we could do that right now unless you have each of the logs to.
I can pull out the logs if you like, but at this time we will take a short 5-minute recess. the authenticity of information on this Excel that the committee has created based on boat logs and vessel usage reports that we had gotten from the boating safety program. Um, Boating safety program through a subpoena duces tecum. And prior to the recess, the vice chair had the floor, and I now return the floor back to the vice chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we apologize for the confusion in regards to the Excel sheet, because we just took it up on the committee, took it upon itself, so it's easier to follow rather than going back to all the 85 different log sheets. But be it as it may, Commissioner, let me start all over with that. So based on the documents obtained by this committee from voting safety records, um, this committee has been able to catalog at least 85 boat trips to accompany Governor Torres and his brothers on personal fishing expeditions to Tinian, Rhoda, and the Northern Islands. And the question is, what do you have to say about that?
Um, Vice, uh, the missions were fulfilled as requested, and as provided by the statute mandating me to provide such service.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the mission requested from the Chief of Security, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. So we know that you did not get prior approval from the grantor, federal grantor agency. Did you ever get any approval after the fact for these potential ventures for the future as
No.
part of the grant, possibly?
No, sir, other than what Madam Chair was, the document that she presented, just for clarification that we brought that before the grantor.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Guerrero, boating safety personnel have testified that they have escorted Mrs. Diane Torres on personal trips to Maniagaha and to the Northern Islands with Governor Torres. In addition, the use of boating safety resources has also been used in these personal excursions of Mrs. Diane Torres. What can you tell us about that?
Again, sir, if the chief of security does request for the usage of the boat, I don't question if it's an official trip or not. If they're going to meet dignitaries out there, well, I don't ask those questions. We just provide it as required by the statute.
Okay, thank you for that. And this would include sunset cruise, happy hour ventures to Maniagawa, midnight trips to Maniagawa, sir?
Uh, I'm not aware of those activities you just mentioned, but yes, it would. Um, we provide service based on the statute.
Okay, and Cam would be sharing a log sheet from DPS that actually states the the business of the Maniagaha trip using boating safety resources. Cam, that's the highlighted portion. Can you see that, Commissioner?
Yes, I can.
According to that logbook that boating safety keeps, at 2200, several police officers escorted on the Zodiac 2 the First Lady Diane to Maniagaha. That's at 2200 in the evening from Smiling Cove Marina. And then they returned back to, so they dropped her at Maniagaha at 11, 10, right? 10 in the evening. And then the boat returned back to Smiling Cove. And then again at midnight, they went back to Maniagaha to escort the First Lady back to the Smiling Cove Marina. And it took them 40 minutes to return to Smiling Cove from that midnight trip. So that's the logbook that we are presenting to you right now. What can you tell us about that?
Madam Chairman, I wasn't aware of this activity. I don't see the boat logs. Those are basically for the commanders and for the maintenance of the vessel. Um, And if they requested, they must have requested earlier in the day to utilize the boat. Um, And I cannot answer if that's a personal trip at 2,200 a night or 2,300 or 2,400. I cannot answer that question. Again, I wasn't on the boat to know, or I wasn't on scene to know what the activity was actually.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Actually, that was the next question, and you answered it already. So, was this possibly the last question? Same thing with the Pogwen trip. Were you able to quantify the costs of the Pogwen trip? How many personnel? How long were there? How many boats were used? How much in fuel costs that actually cost the Department of Public Safety for, let's say, the Pogwen trip?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that information. I'm sure my program manager has compiled that as we need to segregate between what's reimbursable and not reimbursable with the grant itself. I
Mhm.
can provide that to the committee at a later time.
All right, thank you. So I guess the next question will be followed with that document that you will be providing the committee regarding the Pagan trip, and where did the money come from regarding that cost. You will be providing the committee with that information, correct?
Yes, the money, the cost for personnel and the cost for fuel is all absorbed by the local budget of the department.
Sure.
Okay, but I will provide that to you.
Yes, and that's just raising a concern. And if I may, Madam Chair, I understand that the PSDs are under the governor's budget, right? Correct?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't see the PSD. I don't see the governor's budget. Put it that
Okay.
way. I guess that's a simpler way of saying it. So I don't know if they're under, aside from the personal cost, the personal cost under my office.
Okay, so the personnel costs, so overtime costs will fall under DPS.
Yes.
And the boating
Likewise.
safety, fuel costs, and other than the maintenance is shouldered by DPS, correct?
Yes, sir.
Local funds.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned earlier in the hearing that when you are short on your budget to address the overtime or boating safety, you would contact finance or OMB to assist the department, correct?
I bring it up to the attention of the Secretary of Finance,
Okay.
and have a discussion with him, and he's actually the one that recommends what needs to be done, where the money should come from, and if OMB needs to get into the picture, he gets into the picture, yes.
Okay. And you as the head of the Department of Public Safety have a 10% reprogramming authority. Have you ever utilized that authority to transfer funds within the Department of Public Safety to address the issues, and from where to where?
No, sir, I haven't.
Okay. So you're relying on the Department of Finance, correct?
I consult the Department of Finance simply because other areas also have their share of needs, i.e. ammunition,
Okay.
that may be needed.
Sure. And that's understandable. May I ask the commissioner, and on top of the information that you were providing this committee, may I also ask of the budget assistance that you've had requested from the Department of Finance, let's say in the same time period, the last 5 years, in regards to transfers in and transfers out and reprogramming of funds, so that we understand, because we also don't want to cripple DPS in the budgetary process. If we do that, we're under budgeting DPS, so we got to know where the money is being transferred from through finance and OMB. And so it makes it easier for you to be able to justify provide an adequate budget for DPS in the future. And if that's possible, can you provide us those documents as well in your request to the Department of Finance for additional funding to DPS? Is that
Yes, sir, I'll
possible?
work on that as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm just worried because anything over $200,000 and it's being transferred in and out, and it's not going through the legislative process, we're essentially shortchanging DPS on our end, and we don't want to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield for now.
Thank you, Representative Attal. At this time, in the interest of time, I recognize Representative Christina Sablan.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to clarify something on the personnel funding issue. If we could go back to the letter from the Coast Guard grantor or the email. Commissioner, earlier you stated that no DPS personnel or salaries or overtime get paid by the boating safety grant, right? That it's all covered by local funds. But in this email from the grantor advising your department, I'm sorry, can we skip to the email from the Coast Guard? Thank you. The grantor actually advises your department to be sure, so in response to the inquiry, to be sure to keep time distribution records in order to properly charge the grant with only the portion of the grant that's directly related to their boating safety program activities. And the grantor is very clear. He uses these big capital letters: protective service for public officials is not an allowable cost under the boating safety grant. So could you just help me understand? Because it sounds from this email like some portion of DPS salaries or overtime does get paid by the boating safety grant. Could you clarify that?
Yes, Congresswoman. What it is, and I can provide the methodology that the Coast Guard uses when submitting the grant. Whereas if we spend $300,000 of local money, they'll match it with $300,000 for the Coast Guard.
Okay.
So, but again, that's only IE's expenses that's incurred for boating safety activities only. So we don't include PSD salaries into that into the grant itself.
Right, but the email refers to time records. That sounds
Yes.
like timesheets, like personnel
Yes.
timesheets. So,
Yes.
so there is some portion of DPS salaries that could get charged to the grant if it's
No,
no.
no, because what we spend locally, the Coast Guard will give us the same amount for our expenses.
Okay.
So it's the Coast Guard, the boating safety grants are a little different. It's flexible in nature, whereas as long as you spend the money for boating safety activities, they're flexible.
Okay. So for the federal funds that come from this grant, you would have to show timesheets that your officers spent time actually in the program, doing program activities.
Yes, and we submit
Okay.
that to the grant, and that's where he generates his money, saying,
Okay.
okay, this is justified. You're going to get 600,000 because you spent 600,000 of your money.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. At this time, I would like to recognize Representative Richard Lizama.
Thank you, Madam Chair, once again. Good afternoon, sir. Commissioner Guerrero. This is about vehicles provided to the governor and his family. It's a fleet of vehicles. Commissioner, how many vehicles from DPS are provided to the governor?
At the current time right now?
Yes.
Okay, so the governors provide DPS vehicles. All the vehicles assigned to the governor from the PSD side are DPS vehicles. They're not under the governor's office. So the primary vehicle for the governor, and yes, a PSD vehicle and a backup vehicle, which at this point the first lady is using the backup vehicle.
How many vehicles were provided to the First Lady? Was it any?
Particularly, there's not a vehicle provided to the first lady. In all essence, the vehicle that's provided there is for the governor to use, but it's just prerogative. Again, who if you're going to assign it to the first lady for, to run it to events or what, that's his call or the PSD's call.
So that tells me that each PSD gets assigned vehicle from DPS to drive around the governor. And the First Lady and the children.
Chair, I'm sorry, Congressman, but that misstates his testimony. If you like, he can repeat his answer.
Can you move forward, Representative
Thank you.
Lizama?
Well, how many vehicles? You already mentioned about the First Lady does not have a vehicle, but is assigned to the governor. So each PSD get an assigned vehicle from DPS to drive around the governor and the first lady and the children. Is that correct?
No, sir. That's not what I said. I said the governor's given a primary vehicle that he's taken around with, a shadow vehicle that he's followed around with, and a backup vehicle. At this point, that's what the governor's or the first lady has been using to be transported to events. It's not the particular PSD that's assigned the vehicle himself. That's at the discretion of the officer in charge or the Mr. Cruz in this case. He decides who's going to drive the governor where, or if he's going to drive him, or who's going to drop off the first lady or bring the first lady to wherever she's got to go to. Similar to the lieutenant governor as well, same situation.
So if you have 4 PSD up there, you don't have 4 vehicles.
You talked about on duty.
Yes.
Okay, the PSD that are on duty whoever's going to drive the government. The PSDs don't take the vehicles home. It stays there at their state. So if the governor says he's going to go out, then the chief security assigns the individual to drive the governor, or he drives it himself.
Okay.
Now, if the first lady has a official function she has to go to, and she needs to be driven, and the chief says the first lady needs to be driven here because she has official function here, he assigns a PSD to drive the first lady. At no time does the first lady drive the government vehicle herself.
Any of those vehicle purchase or lease that you assigned to?
Purchased, not leased. Purchased.
They were purchased.
Yes.
Are there any of those paid by the federal grant money?
No.
Any of those vehicles was given by the Imperial Pacific International?
No.
Well, thank you. That covers my question. Thank you. Are you back?
I have a few questions. So based on your testimony, you said the governor was given a primary vehicle, one to shadow and one to for backup. Is it my understanding then that there are 3 vehicles assigned for Governor Torres?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I will yield. Representative Probst, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you.
I will recognize Representative Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, so um, each PSC is, I'm sorry, let me try to rephrase this. Is it acceptable for the PSD to drive the children based on the statute we said earlier, right? It's allowable for them to take the children places. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, according to the law.
Okay, okay. So if they wanted to take the children to the movies or take them to the dentist or somewhere, they're allowed to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's protecting public.
Thank you. I just wanted to have that for the record. Thank you. No questions.
I have one question with respect to the vehicles that are assigned to the governor, which the PSDs drive. You said they were purchased vehicles, not using federal funds, local funds, and they are DPS vehicles. Is that correct? Are they equipped with any emergency features on the vehicle to provide for security?
I'm sorry, Chairwoman. This is sensitive information for the security of the governor, and I request that you move to an executive session if you want an answer.
Thank you. I'll withdraw the question for now, but
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, thank you. At this time, I will recognize Representative, oh, I'm sorry, recognize Representative Christina
Just
Sablock.
Thank you, Chair. Just one more clarifying question. So these DPS vehicles that are assigned to the governor and the first lady, or assigned to the governor, the governor may drive these vehicles, any of these vehicles himself, even without police officers present. Like he can use it as his own vehicle, regardless of the function or whether it's private or official.
As much as we don't want him to drive, and I've gotten discussed that with him about driving himself. He's similar to any elected official that has leased or purchased a vehicle. There's an exception to the law, and I can't recall exactly what the law stipulates as far as elected official with regards to government vehicle. I can research it and get back with you on that.
Okay, but he is able to drive these DPS vehicles then? And same with the First Lady, this backup vehicle that the governor
No.
has, she cannot drive these
She
vehicles
cannot.
herself?
She's not a government employee, and I don't recall ever seeing her drive any of those vehicles.
Okay, and then just to follow up on Representative Lizama's question about the vehicles that were purchased and contributed by Imperial Pacific International to DPS, are those still around? And were any of those vehicles transferred to the governor? I didn't hear your answer to that.
And that's why I asked you, Congressman, if it's the vehicles now. There were two vehicles that were I am. Let me back up here. I don't recall if those two vehicles were purchased by IPI or it was through a disaster. Or okay, back up. It was an IPI, but those vehicles have been decommissioned as far as for the governor, lieutenant governor. They're sitting in the warehouse now for any PSD, off-island PSD should they arise, or should they reschedule one to come on island. So those two vehicles are sitting in the warehouse now, DPS warehouse now, been taken care of.
Okay, so there were two IPI purchased vehicles that at one time were assigned to the governor.
Yes.
Okay, and then the number of vehicles that you mentioned, is that exactly the same for the lieutenant governor? He gets one primary, one shadow, one that he may allocate to his wife?
Um, the lieutenant governor, I believe, has three vehicles as well. And that's just at his disposal as far as who he's going to assign it to.
Okay, and did he also receive IPI purchased vehicles?
During I can't recall. I can get back with you on that information.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Objection, Chair. Just for the record, Congresswoman's misstated testimony again. They weren't given to the governor. They were given to the Department of Public Safety and then issued to the governor.
I'm sorry, are you clarifying what happened with the IPI vehicles? Right, they were, well, that was my question, actually. So they were donated by IPI
To the
to the
Department of
department, and then the
Yes.
department allocated them to, but they were purchased originally by IPI.
Yes.
Yes,
Just
thank you.
Just making that clear.
Thank you.
One question, were these IPI vehicles logged with procurement and supply? Does the public auditor know about these vehicles?
I believe so, Madam Chair. I can get back to the information, but I know procurement and supply did document these vehicles.
Thank you. Moving along, I will now recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, let me take this off a little bit to speak a little more clear. Commissioner, the next three questions deal with the governor on his off-island trips and when he does travel off-island on his return. My first question, Commissioner, we have seen from the media video footage and of course photos in the newspapers of you meeting and greeting the governor on the tarmac from his trips off island, the tarmac being at the airport. Do you, as commissioner, are you given an all access badge from CPA? Is that one of the privileges as being a commissioner?
I'm not sure if the badge I have is an all access across the airport itself, but even accessing the airport, I check in with the ports police and they actually guide me through the airport. And not one time have I gone into the airport unaccompanied.
Okay, so you are accompanied as when you enter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Out of curiosity, the governor always travels with the PSDs, with protective service. So, does the governor request that you meet him on the tarmac as he descends from the plane? Does he ask that you meet him?
No, sir.
Okay.
It's common courtesy.
So you go there voluntarily?
Yes,
then?
sir.
Okay, does he ask or request that you carry his hand carry luggage when you see him as he deplanes?
No, sir, he doesn't. It's just that one time, I guess the picture that was taken, um, that I helped him carry his luggage, but I don't normally carry his luggage for him, no.
Okay, and there is obviously a vehicle that's waiting for him on the tarmac, is that correct? The baggage that you carry is placed into a vehicle waiting for the governor, is that correct?
So you're referring to the one particular charter flight, or you're referring for every flight?
Are there different circumstances?
Yes, there are.
Please elaborate.
Okay, so if the particular charter flight is actually contingent on the security protocols for the airport.
Okay.
Normally, when the governor arrives, his vehicle is parked within the gate area, but he does have to go through the clearance of CBP and all that.
Okay, so the baggage that you carried, if on this one particular time, was it placed into his vehicle?
I don't recall if I must have passed it on to his driver. I would assume it's
But
or let me rephrase that.
yeah,
I don't know once I passed it on to his driver, I don't know where the bag went as far as
so what we do know is that, okay, let's say for that flight that you were uh, referring to, this hand carried baggage that you carried and uh, give to the driver or whatever, it went into the vehicle. Um, this vehicle then leaves the airport. Is that correct?
I don't know if it leaves immediately. No.
Okay. Well, do you know if that baggage was inspected by customs?
No, I don't.
Okay. But in previous times when you've met the governor, does he go through customs? Are all bags, including his hand carries, cleared by customs every time?
So I don't know if he goes to the customs inspection area. I know upon arrival, he's met at the aircraft by a customs officer. What's discussed during that period or with the governor, I'm not privy to those information.
Okay, so you're not aware if it is in fact inspected by customs officials?
No.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Madam Chair, if it's okay with the
Please proceed.
committee, I'd like to ask the question that I posed earlier. Commissioner, this is with regard to the NDAs. And I'd like to repeat this question if I may. The committee has subpoenaed and received no less than 12 NDAs with DPS and the Office of the Governor that have been signed by officers of your department. All of these were signed on or about June 22nd and 23rd of this year, when this committee's investigation of the governor's public expenditures was already underway. Commissioner, how do you explain these NDAs if you said that no DPS personnel have signed any such NDAs by and or between the Department of Public Safety, DPS officers, and the Office of the Governor and or Ms. Diane Tadela Torres?
Objection for the record. As I explained earlier, without those NDAs, it would be hard for my client to answer. He has already answered that, to his knowledge, there is no NDA, no such NDAs.
But thank you, counsel. But I can assure you, as we have alluded to earlier when we were discussing with you, that those NDAs do exist. There's 12 of them that are signed. We've welcomed you to verify and look that there are signatures. I think the concern has been something that has been customary at DPS of the fear of retaliation. So I think there are officers that are concerned with their names being known. So that's why we were asking council if you could look at the signatures and the names and verify that they are in fact turned in.
Again, it's my client's position that DPS did not and the governor do not have any such non-disclosure agreements. If you guys have evidence otherwise, please present it to us and I can discuss with my client and we'll get back to you.
I would like to state for the record that we did offer the council an in-camera review of the signed NDAs, the original ones that we have obtained through a subpoena ducis tecum, and that due to serious concerns, as Representative Ed Probst has mentioned, we are not willing to disclose that information up on the public screen. But I do want to say for the record that we did offer counsel an in-camera review, and he has declined.
And just for the record, Chair, to be clear, you offered me an in-camera review
Yes, I
and
did
not my
state that I
client.
did offer you, the council,
And my
an
response
in-camera
was
review.
I couldn't do it without showing my client and talking to him about it. So that is why I declined that offer. If you'd like to present the evidence now, I'd be more than willing to receive it and discuss it with my client.
We are willing to redact the names on that to show you and or your client. This time I would like to recognize Representative Christina Sabon.
Thank you, Chair. So, Commissioner, is it then your testimony under oath that you are unaware of the existence of any signed NDAs within your department?
Yes, Congressman, that's my position until such time that I see one. But to my knowledge, I'm unaware of any signed documents.
Okay, so in other words, you did not know what was happening in your department that appeared to be an attempt to impede an ongoing legislative investigation.
Objection, Chair. That is
Assuming,
argumentative.
assuming,
And, excuse me, may I please lodge my objection?
Madam Chair, I'm still asking the question, actually.
You
Hold off, counsel.
Assuming,
Recognize
yes,
Representative
thank you.
Sabon.
So assuming that these signed NDAs do exist, you didn't know what was happening within your department as these NDAs were being circulated for signature. You didn't know that that was happening at all.
What was the AG investigating? Oh. Yeah.
Congresswoman, as mentioned earlier, I wasn't aware of any NDAs signed. As a matter of fact, I didn't see the actual document until the subpoena came down and it was attached.
Okay, and did you take any steps to investigate whether these NDAs actually existed? As you said you would in your letter?
Yes, I believe. Yes, I do. Just didn't get back to the investigators as far as what the outcome of that investigation was. But I can get that information, pass it on to the committee.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What steps did you take then?
I told the internal affairs.
As we discussed earlier, Congresswoman, this is sensitive DPS information, how he goes about these types of investigation. I ask if you want to go further with this, that we move to an executive session. Or if you would like, we'll lay it out in that report we're going to provide the committee.
What was your question, Representative Sablan?
The question is, what steps did he take to verify whether these NDAs actually existed?
Just as
As he said he would and would report back to the committee in his letter of July.
the only issue, Chair, is a matter of public, right? Just as you don't want to show us the NDA agreements with the signatures, we don't want to alert anyone with any of this sensitive type of information. So we're not saying that he won't answer. I'm just asking that you move to an executive session so that it's not public.
And as we have offered you, counsel, earlier, we are willing to give you in-camera review because we have serious concerns. Right now, we're getting, even prior to this hearing, we've been getting messages of concerns from DPS personnel, and they fear for their jobs, for their families. And that is the reason why we take that seriously. And again, I'm offering you an in-camera review of these signed NDAs. If we are to publish them, we will be redacting the names.
Chair, just to be clear, I was just using that as an example of why we don't want to give out our information regarding the investigation.
Madam Chair,
I understand your position.
Recognize Representative Sablan.
I mean, what has already been stated for the record, and we can move on, is that the commissioner attempted, made some kind of attempt, asked some officers to look into the matter, and never got back a report. And we can move on from there. So I want to verify now at this time, Commissioner, do you disavow the validity of these NDAs? If assuming that they exist, do you disavow their validity?
Before he answers that question, again, Congresswoman was misstating the previous testimony.
I was restating what I heard him say. He can repeat
it's
himself. He can
misstating-
repeat his answer.
Or you can refer to his previous answer. Congresswoman, I'm only noting these objections. I'm not trying to fight you. I'm noting these objections for the record. As I
Duly
just did.
noted.
Thank you.
Witness, please answer the question, the last question that Representative Sablan posed. Representative Sablan, please repeat your question.
Sure. Well, counsel just asserted that I misstated what the commissioner just said. So perhaps the commissioner can restate what he said for the record before counsel objected. Did you take any steps to look into the matter, yes or no?
This question has been asked and answered. He
What was
said
the
he
answer?
did, and that he would
did.
turn in a report for the committee.
Okay, and that report has never come.
It hasn't
So,
come yet, but
moving
as
on.
Chair said, we will be allowed to turn it in.
Thank
And-
you. We will move on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then the final question in this line was, assuming that such NDAs exist that have been signed by your officers, Commissioner, do you now disavow their validity? Do you say they're not valid? They don't bind the officers to anything?
I'm going to ask my client not to answer that question without seeing the evidence first. Like, that is a very unfair question to ask him. He needs to see what you're talking about before he's able to answer it.
He has seen.
With all due respect,
Sample.
counsel, Representative Sablan said, assuming these are documents that we obtained, does the witness now disavow their validity? And I can assure you that we do have these documents.
Chair, if I may respond.
Yes, and then we will move
We're
on.
asking for facts here. A hypothetical question is not a fact. Thank you.
Representative Sablan, would you like to restate your question?
No, I don't. If the commissioner is unwilling to state for the record whether he would disavow any hypothetical NDAs, we can move on.
Thank you.
Can I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Commissioner, how would you describe the relationship of DPS with federal law enforcement agencies? Can you speak into the mic, Counsel?
My apologies. That's a vague question. If you could be more specific with which federal agencies, maybe it would be.
It's an open-ended question, and I invite the commissioner to answer it as he sees most fit and appropriate.
Joe?
Your question is, how do I classify my relationship with the federal agencies?
How would you describe your relationship with federal law enforcement
It
agencies?
depends which federal agencies you're referring to.
Mhm.
But we do work, we just signed an MOU again with the Drug Enforcement Task Force. We signed an MOU with Homeland Security, Homeland Investigation. We did work closely with CBP. So I think a majority of it, we have a good working relationship.
Okay. What about the FBI?
The FBI, we have an issue with the FBI that we're trying to iron out.
I'm sorry, what issue is that?
It's regarding the MOU issue with them.
Regarding an MOU? This is just an MOU defining your relationship in
So it's a
between
range issue.
the range issue. Okay. Um, and did DPS's relationship with your federal partners change in any way after information came to light that voting safety resources had been used in connection with the governor's personal recreational activities, such as fishing trips or trips to Manigaha?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Did DPS's relationship with the FBI change in any way after the FBI raids on the office of the governor, the homes and vehicles of the governor and his family, and Imperial Pacific International in November 2019?
Can you repeat again your question? I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. Did DPS's relationship with the FBI change in any way after the FBI raids on the governor's office, the homes and vehicles of the governor and his family, and Imperial Pacific International in November of 2019?
I don't have an issue with the FBI as an agency. I have an issue with an FBI agent, and I did lodge a complaint, and that I believe that issue is being looked into. So
Okay, and was that pursuant to this incident of November 2019?
not the particular raid itself.
I see. And where were you on the day when those raids were happening?
Objection for the record, Chairwoman. This line of questioning was not at the subpoena, listed in the subpoena. And so my client is not prepared to answer these questions at the time. It's outside of the scope.
Duly noted, Council. I believe these questions relate to the commissioner's duties and responsibilities as a commissioner, and also it leads back to the budgetary issues of federal grants and local funds and all that. That is the nexus to these questions. So will your witness please answer the question?
I be if my memory serves right, I believe I was in my office at the time.
Okay, thank you. Has DPS provided any assistance or been a partner at all in federal investigations involving the governor?
No,
Thank you. Has DPS provided assistance or been a partner at all in federal investigations involving Imperial Pacific International?
I believe they have in the past. Yes.
In the past. Thank you. Is there any policy in place at the Department of Public Safety that requires the chief of security for the governor to report a request from the governor that appears to be unlawful or unethical?
I believe it's in our regulation, DPS regulation, that any officer that feels that any order issued that's unlawful should not be followed.
And what about reported? Are officers obligated to report unlawful orders?
Well, if it's not followed, then yes, they will end up reporting it, yes.
Okay, and that extends to governors or public officials who are being provided with protective security. The officers would have a duty to report.
So long as they're employed by DPS, yes.
Thank you. And are DPS officers required to undergo any ethics training so that they know how to spot violations of the ethics code?
I believe that's part of the academy process. And on occasion, the AG would come over and provide in-service training. I'm sure that issues is part of the in-service training as well.
Specifically training in ethics?
I'm sure that's probably one of the training that they have or can provide, yes.
Okay, and have you yourself undergone this training in ethics?
Not at DPS, no.
Okay, but prior to your service as commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that ethics training should be required, mandatory for police officers?
I believe that's part of the academy process that's taught, but I can get back with you as far as what's taught at academy. I can't remember right off the top of my head right now.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. I promise you, we are almost done, maybe another 15 minutes, if nobody has any clarifying questions. I have just three, maybe. Commissioner Guerrero, have you ever advised any PSD or police officer to attend any political gatherings?
Not to my recollection, Madam Chair.
Have you ever advised them against it pursuant to your regulations?
I try not to discuss politics within the department, Madam Chair.
Okay, fair enough. Do you know if the governor has ever encouraged or asked DPS personnel to attend political gatherings?
Not to my knowledge, Madam Chair.
Do you attend cabinet meetings that the governor calls for?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever witnessed Mrs. Diane Torres attending cabinet meetings?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Last question. We have on record governor purchasing numerous cameras, Nikon cameras, GoPros, Bose headsets, electronics. Are you a recipient of any of these?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. That is all I have. Are there any questions from the other members? If there are none, none? Okay, at this time, we will dismiss or excuse this witness. You are free from the subpoena at this point. We thank you for your time and your service. Council Ugan, thank you for your patience and due diligence. And at this time, I will call for a recess until Monday morning at 10:30 a.m. It is now 4:52 p.m. We are now in recess. Hold on.